We looked at the films of Karyn Kusama, which was, I mean, just an awesome place to start with this series. I'm so happy that I did that because I enjoyed watching Karyn Kusama's movies so much, and I went through an adjustment period because I do my best to not watch movies with too many subtitles. Just because they, like, in the age of multitasking, that just makes it hard to multitask. You want to give the movie its due. So, but it was perfect because, again, later today we're going to do a stream on Joachim Trier, and his movies, all except for one, weren't in English either. So, hey, warming up to it. But fantastic two directors to start the series with. Unfortunately, sandwiched in between is what we're talking about today, and that is Karyn Kusama's films. So just a little bit about the series. I watch all the films from a director, sans context. If I've seen a movie before, I've seen a movie before, but generally I don't actually, look the movies up. I kind of watch it with no context to just get the raw impression of it. I don't want to look at any marketing or collateral or descriptions or anything. I want to just fully experience them as they were probably intended to be experienced by the director. And yeah, the whole idea here is that all great directors have their bad movies, or do they? That's kind of what we're figuring out. So my name is Ben Garvis. I'm an award-winning filmmaker. I work, historically, I've worked largely with documentaries, but I've written 3 screenplays, one of which will be made this year. One will probably kick off production this year. But yeah, trying to get out of documentary and into something that's a little bit more scripted. And yeah, we're doing this series. If you haven't run into me on the internet before, I also do a web series called Bet on Film, where we talk about all of the business aspects of filmmakers, because filmmakers are usually fantastic artists, but terrible business people, and business, unfortunately, ends up being almost 90% of what a filmmaker ends up doing. It sucks, but it's a fact. So today we're talking about Karyn Kusama. We're going to take her 5 films. Girlfight was the first one. Can I do this in order? Girlfight, Aeon Flux, then Jennifer's Body, Invitation, and Destroyer. And we're going to talk about each one of the 5, and we're going to rank them. So I'm going to start with a little bit about Karyn Kusama. So bury the lead here. I really did not enjoy most of her movies, but it's kind of interesting because when you look at her IMDb page, and you look at the things that she has directed, she actually has a really great track record when it comes to directing TV shows. So she was an executive producer on Yellow Jackets, and directed a couple of episodes of *Halt and Catch Fire*, *The Man in the High Castle*, *Masters of Sex*, and *Billions*, all of which are fantastic shows. So it's kind of interesting because it seems like her medium, where she succeeds a little bit more as a director, as a storyteller, in my opinion, this is all in my opinion, is she really seems to thrive more when the platform is TV. But her directorial debut, Girlfight, for a feature-length scripted film, was written and directed by her when she was 31. Since then, she's gone on to receive 21 major award nominations, and she's won 8 of them. So Girlfight came out in the year 2000. Kusama herself is an avid boxer, so she kind of used her experience to inspire the film. The budget for the movie was about $1 million, which, don't we all as indie filmmakers wish that we could have started with $1 million budget? Yeah, that's anyway, it made $1.6 million at the box office, which was considered a poor outing. Only $600,000 a profit. Distribution rights for the film were bought for an estimated $3 million, so she turned out all right. It won the Best Director and tied for the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance. Her whole goal with this was kind of to subvert the classic boxing story with a female lead, and I think in a lot of ways she did that. If you're looking at like Raging Bull or Rocky as the baseline. She did some things different. She did some things similar. There are some slightly cringy moments in it where she leaned way too far into the trope if she was trying to get out of it. This was actually Michelle Rodriguez's acting debut. She had only been an extra before that, and unfortunately, her performance is pretty rough. But I did notice her performance was really rough at the start of the film, and by the end of the film, it was like she had kind of figured out what it was that she was doing. The story behind it is that Kusama actually thought that Michelle Rodriguez's audition tape was a disaster. And she had actually looked at 350 plus women to play the main character in Girlfight, and there was nobody who had the same kind of raw power that Rodriguez did. So she ended up casting Rodriguez despite a terrible audition, I guess. I thought that the movie was a great delivery on newer ways to present boxing. I hadn't watched it. I mean, full disclosure, I hadn't watched it before watching it for this series, and I was pretty impressed. Again, Rodriguez's acting was really bad to start with, but when she started to catch stride, you kind of then got immersed into the movie. There's this scene where she is boxing somebody, and the way that Kusama presents it with the glove coming up to the camera and the pop, you feel like you're almost getting punched in the face. And that's like, there are moments that she just really nailed this movie, and I understand why she won Best Director and tied for the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance that year, because there are moments that were really fantastic, but at the same time, there's this weird flip side, where I'll give you the best example I think I can give you is the end of the movie ends with a freeze frame and a zoom, which is just a weird, I mean, it's already a cringy way to end a movie, but then you think of like how Rocky ended, and it was like, if she's trying to subvert the genre, then why would you end with the exact same approach that the title holder, boxing reference, in the genre ends? Why would you do it the same? It would be cringy if any other movie did it. It's double cringy if it's a boxing movie. So yeah, I don't know. I would say Girlfight is probably going to get a B. I mean, look, nailing a B on a directorial debut is fantastic, and I feel terrible putting a Sundance Award winner in the B tier. But I just can't. The rough acting at the start and the way that it ended and some of the kitschy things that she leaned into, even though she shouldn't have, were just kind of weird. There was a love story in it that kind of reminded me a lot of Love and Basketball, which actually, let me look at this. Love and Basketball 2000, which came out the same year. So like this falling in love while being competitive in sports story was told multiple times that year. I don't know how that ended up happening, but it's kind of funny. The more of this series that I do, the times that these things end up being trends on accident are interesting. So okay. That was in 2000. Kusama didn't do a second film until Aeon Flux in 2005. So there was a 5-year difference. And when I tell you the budget change, it's going to make a lot more sense. So Girlfight she did for $1 million, and it made $1.6 million at the box office. She then helmed Aeon Flux, which had a $62 million budget. Now, this was, if you're not familiar with Aeon Flux, it was a very popular comic series and animation series before it was redone for film. There's a lot of drama behind the movie, but before we talk about the drama, let me just give you, so it ended up, $62 million budget, and it grossed $52 million at the box office. So in for all intents and purposes, it lost $10 million before it went to video. Only $25 million of that was domestic, so it was actually much larger overseas than it was in the US. But here's your context. It was competing with Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, The Chronicles of Narnia, and King Kong. So if you're going to market to compete with those 3 franchises / IPs, that's a tough market to try to get into. That's a lot of competition. So yeah, it didn't do fantastic. Part of that might have been timing, but there's a lot of finger pointing around what did and didn't work and why it did and didn't work. One of the big ones is that Karyn Kusama says herself that she basically did not have creative control over the film. That and you see a little bit of proof because the director's cut contains 30 minutes of additional footage that I didn't get to see because I didn't watch the director's cut. I wanted to watch the one that everyone else watched. The movie itself was greenlit by an executive that wasn't there during the release, so it had been cut significantly to be different than Kusama's delivered version. And she's since said that this movie has completely driven her to make sure that she had full creative control over her future projects. And I can say that in the list of movies that Karyn Kusama has done, Aeon Flux definitely stands out as the worst. From a delivery perspective, right? Obviously the story is really important. The background on the story, the intellectual property is really important, and all of that. I mean, Charlize Theron, you really couldn't ask for a better talent to go along with the film, but this thing leaned so heavily into CGI. You basically lost the value of storytelling because it was just so focused on the CGI. And I as a director, I always tell myself, do anything you can as a practical effect before you even remotely consider CGI. And if you consider CGI, make sure that scene is absolutely necessary, because if you use CGI when you shouldn't, it's going to stand out to people. I think one of the problems with Aeon Flux when I was watching it was that it felt like the CGI was leaned into so heavily that they forgot about the way that physics work. Physics weren't real in that universe. And I remember watching this when I was much younger, when it came out in 2005. So, 20 years ago. Oh my God, that was 20 years ago. I remember watching it and thinking oh, cool, look, they have these superpowers, but you go back and you watch it as an adult, and it's not that they're trying to build this universe where this woman has superpowers as much as they just forgot physics were real. There's a scene near the end of the film where she's crashing down on, for lack of a better term, I'm gonna call it a blimp. She crashes to Earth from a blimp, and she just kind of lands from this blimp. It's they just forgot that you can't just naturally land on your feet when you fall from 500, 1,000 feet up in the air, but she does it. And it's hard to, so let me just say this. I'm going to put this movie in the D tier. No, do I have to? Yeah, I'm going to put it in the D tier. And that's heartbreaking, because it really does seem like this is just not the movie that Karyn Kusama intended it to be. It just is what the studio made it. And we have so many examples of movies that studios destroyed out there. And this is it's one of the victims. So that takes us, so that was 2005 when that released. Kusama basically goes another 4 years before she does another movie. And the one that she does, I think it was largely the right movie for her to do next. And it makes sense that she waited until she had the right story and she negotiated for the right control over it. And that was, let me actually close these out. Boop, 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 boop. That was 2009's Jennifer's Body, which as a straight white male meant something completely different to me than it meant to Karyn Kusama. Oh, hi. two lanes. Hello. Jennifer's Body. Okay, as a straight white male, this movie meant something completely different to me than I think Karyn Kusama intended it to be, and this is one of the things that we have to cover in this. So okay, Jennifer's Body. It was written by Diablo Cody, and if you're not familiar with the name Diablo Cody is a fantastic writer that has done some fantastic movies. She wrote Juno, she wrote Young Adult, she wrote Tully, but fantastic writer for Kusama to partner with. So Jennifer's Body, hey two lanes. So I do a series where I go into all of the films of a director and rank them. So we're working on Karyn Kusama. We're on her third film, Jennifer's Body. So Jennifer's Body grossed $32 million with only a $16 million budget. So Kusama did effectively double the expenditure on that, or double the revenue, which, you know, it's sad because in Hollywood, a $16 million movie that makes $32 million is somehow looked at as a commercial failure. But that kind of takes us to what it meant to me as a straight white male. So I have this allure to go see this movie in 2009, so I would have been 22, 23. You can do the math on that. And I went to go see it because this movie came out peak Megan Fox, starring Megan Fox as a vixen, basically. So this movie was marketed toward men. There was a huge play for the sexuality, and like in the marketing materials, there's this, God, this makes me sound so shallow. There's this makeout scene between Amanda Seyfried and Megan Fox. So like this was Megan Fox at peak Megan Fox. The second Transformers movie had come out that year, and Amanda Seyfried was gaining momentum. This was Fox at peak Megan Fox. This was Amanda Seyfried at sort of Amanda Seyfried, and it also had J.K. Simmons, and I love me anything with some J.K. Simmons in it. But it's been cited as, and it has grown a cult following, and I think that it's grown a cult following because it is a movie about female empowerment. For as much as Karyn Kusama's movies can be a little bit shallow at times, this is about as deep as they get. The Jennifer's Body was about female empowerment, and I think that's given it somewhat of a cult life after, in the streaming era, really. But it was marketed toward men, and it worked on men. You know, that $32 million at the box office from a $16 million budget, that was the result of the marketing toward men. And that's not really what the movie is. So people would go see it, they'd go home and say, this wasn't what I wanted it to be, and then less people went to go see it. And if it had been marketed toward the right audience as an empowerment movie, it probably would have had very different results, and you can tell that because of how it has performed since then, as it's grown that cult following. So filming for that was actually supposed to start in 2007, but it was delayed to 2008 because of the writer's strike. But Jennifer's Body, again, female empowerment movie, but it's not an art house film, right? If you're a film lover, it is not a film, it is a movie. And so you have to appreciate it as entertainment. But I think Kusama did a good job of weaving in quality storytelling, kind of a horror, thriller, love story, comedy. That's a lot to try to do in one movie, but I think she definitely pulls that off. So the next movie we're going to talk about is Karyn Kusama's The Invitation, which came out in 2015. It's funny, I actually forgot. I had watched this movie at some point, but I had forgotten that this was a Karyn Kusama movie. So when I was making the list, I actually left it off, and I was like, I think I need to go. I'm going to go Google and make sure I didn't forget a movie, because I only had 3 or 4 on the list. I was like, oh, there is another one. So if you haven't watched The Invitation, it's a slow burn horror / drama, I guess. A little bit of, not sci-fi, not paranormal. You don't know what it is. You feel like you may be immersed in a cult while you're watching it, and you're just not sure until the end. The movie was actually shot in sequence over the course of 20 days. Kusama went down bare bones to the budget. It had a $1 million budget because it was truly an indie film. It had I hate saying indie film when I'm describing a movie that was shot for $1 million, but it had a $350,000 box office, but that was just off of a limited release, just a couple of theaters. Originally, the movie was supposed to cast Luke Wilson, Zachary Quinto, Topher Grace, and Johnny Galecki, but it ended up starring none of them. It's a lot of tension, it's a lot of grief, it's a lot of depression. This is the movie where she really digs into the human experience. Please, nobody tune out just because I'm going to talk about the human experience for a little bit. But, she had lost a brother when she was very young, and she had seen what grief does to parents. And for a movie that's so full of drama and tension and kind of has that slow burn quality to it, you wouldn't expect her to be able to also talk about these issues. But you're basically experiencing this mystery, murder-ish, cult-ish scene. Yeah, it feels like one scene because it's just happens over a dinner party. But at the same time, you're experiencing stuff about how parents experience grief when they lose a child. And for that reason, I'm going to say that this is probably an A-tier movie, which means that I have to bump Jennifer's Body down. So, okay. So, yeah, The Invitation is going to A, Jennifer's Body is going to B. So that takes us to our last Karyn Kusama movie, which, it says something. This came out in 2018, so we haven't had a scripted film, feature-length film made by Karyn Kusama since 2018. I kind of want to, I'm going to go Google after this. I want to know, like, what is she working on? I mean, she's obviously done all these TV shows. If you're just tuning in now, Karyn Kusama was an executive producer on Yellow Jackets and has directed episodes of *Halt and Catch Fire*, *Man in the High Castle*, *Masters of Sex*, and *Billions*. So she is busy, but she's not making these like solo directorial films anymore. So *Destroyer*, the big draw on *Destroyer* was that it casted Nicole Kidman, which in itself is usually a good sign for a movie as far as the script goes. Apparently Kidman had been kind of pursuing it because she wanted to be involved after having read the script. It also has Sebastian Stan in it. It had Bradley Whitford, and I love a Bradley Whitford cameo. But *Destroyer*, despite Nicole Kidman, and I'm a fangirl of Bradley Whitford, but despite Nicole Kidman and a $10 million budget, it only grossed $5 million at the box office. And like there's something just that was just generally, the vibe was weird. Like there's something very tentative about it. The opening weekend, it only opened in 3 theaters. But it went on to do $1.5 million domestic. But again, this is against a $10 million budget. And this is a movie that has Nicole Kidman in it. It's like a noir cop drama. And if Kusama's goal was to not do anything prototypical of a noir cop drama, she nailed it. But I think in the process of removing the tropes, she ended up making something that just inherently was boring. I really did not like this movie. It was the best word I could find to describe it is dry. It was really dry. It was a little bit sad, but like you just never felt emotionally connected to it. Like I never got into the movie like I would get into even some of the worst movies that I've ever watched. You know, like you can get immersed into it even if you don't like it, but I couldn't even get immersed into it, even though I had Bradley Whitford in it. I think I spent the whole Bradley Whitford scene thinking, oh my God, it's Bradley Whitford. It's the guy from the West Wing. So the net result is Destroyer goes right down in the D tier with Aeon Flux. And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up this live stream about Karyn Kusama.